Temporarily.
You're here temporarily?
I'm here for work.
Okay.
You might be an accountant?
We run a small business finance company.
Right.
Do you work in finance at all?
I work in law.
In law?
Yeah.
Okay, so this might be an interesting question. It also sounds like you're from somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm from London.
You're from London.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what we're actually asking about is, you've heard of tariffs and how, it costs more to bring goods, but we have a lot of virtual admin jobs where certain companies are getting overseas labor for $5 an hour. Should that be something that we tax or get rid of? Like, you're here, so you're in America. It's a little bit different than paying somebody $5 in a foreign country. What are your thoughts on stuff like that?
So what's the specific ask? Should labor that we outsource to
the specific
countries, should we be taxing the, saving on labor that you're making? Or what is it? Like, are we taxing the delta between what you would have paid an equivalent American citizen versus what you're... No, I don't think so. I think that's equally disruptive to the supply chain.
I'm not as interested in supply chain. More interested in, we work with small businesses, so they're trying to compete. And when they have to go against competitors that are offshoring and, absolutely destroying them on labor cost. So the question isn't just, should we tax it? It's also, think about it like this. I'll give you a scenario. I miss a payment on my credit card. All of a sudden, I'm going to get calls by somebody who doesn't have a college degree in a foreign country. They have my social security number. Should we not be giving these jobs maybe to college educated people? Or what are your thoughts on the overall thing? Because I don't have it nailed down.
Well, I mean, my thoughts on tariffs altogether. I'm generally not a fan of it as a matter of economic policy. I mean, I think it sounds better on paper than what it actually achieves. Obviously, there is the theoretical goal of bringing manufacturing back into America, but for one, that's very much dependent on companies being willing to transition all of their manufacturing base here. Two, I kind of don't understand how you can simultaneously have a goal with tariffs to effectively be revenue raising and equally use tariffs as like a negotiating tactic which you're willing to withdraw if countries concede to you. It seems like
I understand what you're saying, yeah.
Counterintuitive cross purposes here. You have on the one hand, you're purporting to raise revenue, and on the other hand, you're willing to withhold tariffs and withdraw.
No, that's a really good point. I'm not disagreeing with you. In fact, so I stand on the other side. I kind of support tariffs, but I think it would have been a more creative approach before tariffing goods and services that affect us. Why didn't we tax people who are using virtual assistants in foreign countries? Because that's something where it's not a tangible good.
I can understand the argument. So would the argument effectively be big corporations within America, you tax them to the extent they outsource labor?
Or to some degree. I think I've heard of it used as the term human equivalent automation tax. I don't know if that applies to this, but I think the thing is like, okay, me and you agree a little bit on tariffs and being like, all right, but you're also using it as a negotiation tool. Is it a revenue raising thing? But better yet, better than charging us, why does Chase Bank, or maybe not Chase Bank, why does any corporation get to have 100 unskilled, non-in-debt, non-college grads on the phones answering emails? You know what I'm trying to say? Like,
I can understand. Candidly, I haven't particularly thought about the subject much. The issue of outsourcing labor.
I don't think anybody's named whatever this is yet.
Pardon?
No, I don't think whatever we're talking about right now, hopefully will be a discussion, but I don't have a name for it.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it's an interesting point. I'd definitely consider it further, but it's effectively then the proposition just to tax big corporations. So you're still taxing American corporations, I guess, domestically, but you're taxing them to the extent they're using foreign workers.
Yeah, and that way, it wouldn't impact us at the grocery store.
I think it would. I think the cost would very much get passed on to the consumer still.
Well, I think, all right, I'm 34. I don't know how old you are. 23. Little bit of a different generational gap. I hear what you're saying. I hear you. but I want to remind you that at 34, I was once 23. A lot of my friends who graduated college never got good jobs with their communication degree or their marketing degree. So my argument would be, if you're going to sell me health insurance on the phone, I'd rather you'd be a college-educated American rather than a $5 an hour foreigner who now has my social security number. So I'm not trying to say exactly what you were saying, but I'm trying to say, hey, we got these college graduates that can't even get jobs. Like, and you're saying, oh, it will still affect the consumer. It's like, there's jobless Americans. Like, it's, and I don't have the whole thing formulated, you know?
I mean, I certainly understand the argument, but it equally does kind of feel like somewhat, it's kind of missing steps to the extent that if
what's the extent we could go to then? Say the virtual
like,
admins.
At least intuitively, it feels difficult to just impose a law such that you would almost mandate the employment.
Let me ask you a good question, because I'm not in favor of the machine. You know what I mean? I want to make sure, like, we represent small businesses, mom and pop shops.
I respect that.
So here's the question: how low are virtual admins allowed to be paid? If you found out that overseas workers that are currently getting $5 an hour would equally accept $1.50, and those major corporations could keep the extra $3.50, are you okay with that?
I'm generally not a massive fan of exploitative practices altogether.
But I think they're already doing it.
Of course. Like, this is, I mean, like, corporations are already outstripping small businesses in every respect. You look at least in the UK, for example, you take Starbucks as an example. They're paying little to no. They're paying very little corporation tax because they effectively have they can, engage really professional advisors to effectively set up complicated tax structures such that you can, reduce your taxable income to almost your taxable revenue to virtually nothing. And yet small businesses don't have the same facility.
I hope we can figure out.
Of course, I think there is.
Because you had an excellent point about the tariffs. Nobody has said that yet. It was a really good point about you're using it as a negotiation tool, but you're also saying it's revenue raising. So now you're being facetious, and I totally get that. So what do you have any ideas on what America could do to strengthen itself while not offending? Like, I feel like part of the argument's hard to have because we're like, oh, we're talking about foreigners. Now it's a racial thing. We're being offensive. And it's like, but we're totally disregarding the jobless college graduates and massive student debt that they can't claim bankruptcy to get out of.
Yeah.
So it's a mess.
Yeah.
No judgment. What thoughts do you have on what we could do?
How would I fix America? It's a bit of a loaded question.
As a Briton, and we've heard your examples of what we should do before. Hang on.
How would I fix America? Well, for one, if we're talking about economic policy, I'm a big fan of free trade. I think free trade is generally beneficial. Obviously, tariffs can be a protectionist measure which is necessary where you have, for example, like foreign markets which can come in and absolutely wipe out the local markets. So I can understand like the role of tariffs to kind of protect domestic or like domestically vulnerable industries which at least perhaps they haven't had the chance to.
I think one of the things, because I like tariffs to a certain degree.
Why do you like tariffs?
I'll tell you why I like them, but I think what we agree on is what I don't like. What I don't like is that, we want to bring manufacturing back to America, but to make the American people have to bear the brunt of the impact of how long is it going to take to move manufacturing back? 12 months, 24 months? Why are we having to pay the brunt for the 24 months? So I'm with you.
And I think even then, though...
But that's why we got to get rid of virtual assistants, is my opinion.
I also think it's almost quite reductive to suggest that, tariff, like, even bringing onshoring domestic manufacturing, I still think tariffs are going to have an effect on that nonetheless because they apply to the raw materials, right? So even if you can bring the manufacturing into America, you're not going to necessarily... America doesn't necessarily have all the raw materials that you'll need. Like China, massive repositories of raw materials that are very fundamental for a lot of technological equipment. And so, notwithstanding any onshoring of domestic manufacturing, you're still going to have the same issues of importing raw materials, and it's still going to ultimately be passed on to the consumer. What I would like to see is more free trade agreements, ultimately. I think that would be a goal.
I'm a libertarian by party, but what I will say about what we're discussing is also this. I think AI is going to start producing a lot of this stuff, so I think it is important that we figure out how to do it here. Otherwise, we're never going to be able to do it. But that was why, when we were talking about it in our office and we were thinking about these things, it's like, hey, I while I might support tariffs, I also understand the actual impact, and that's why it's like, hey, couldn't we have made it illegal for foreigners to be able to have our social security numbers and solicit our business? I'm really stuck on this point of if I miss a credit card payment, some guy somewhere else in the world paid a third of minimum wage, has my private information, and he's not even a citizen. Yeah, so it's like they should just make it.
I'm not necessarily completely convinced by the argument about data privacy. I think our data is massively concentrated in the hands of very few corporations,
but they're American.
They are American.
They should have to be American.
That doesn't make them, invulnerable from data breaches.
Of course.
And we know there are always data breaches.
Listen, I'm also putting up the argument for the dudes your age that are about to graduate. Yeah. They're going to graduate with a communications degree, and they're not even going to be able to sell health insurance because somebody else is selling it for $4 an hour.
I mean, I wouldn't say these people who necessarily, if they're graduating with communication degrees, it seems somewhat simplistic to suggest that their only means of making money is
not their own
health insurance.
Listen,
I feel like there are.
I don't want it to be a racial thing.
And I completely understand, the struggle of the job market right now. It's obvious, it's very bad in the UK.
Well, because here's the thing too, right? Separate the racial part. The company would have still been profitable if they paid all of their people $20 an hour. They're actively choosing to pay $5. They're pocketing the $15. So right now, is that who you want to fight for? Are you fighting for that guy?
I'm not fighting for that.
But that's what I'm saying. I feel like a lot of times,
I massively sympathize with small businesses. I massively do.
Your generation and my generation are definitely more focused on not being uninclusive. So I know that's where our brains automatically go, but I feel like we're letting our college students suffer in a little bit. And I'm just trying to figure out, how do we get a middle ground? How could we have made more money and not have to tax the American people?
Many people, I think there's a good argument for a massive wealth tax ultimately on I think it's
because they should have to pay their employees.
Extremely concerning the rate at which billionaire wealth has skyrocketed relative to
Can we stop? If that billionaire is outsourcing, should we make him pay his people more?
Yeah, but it depends. What are we making them? For example,
here's a good question. I just thought of this. Should minimum wage on American businesses apply even if you're not in America? If you work for an American company, should you be guaranteed minimum wage based on America?
It's a very difficult. I haven't actually thought about that much.
I just made it up.
If you work for an American company, should you be entitled to American? Well, for one, I don't think American minimum wage is particularly generous.
That's not the cool. Hold on.
I'm not sure you do.
We're trying to get the money away from the billionaire right now.
Of course. But I don't necessarily know,
So you support...
Surely just a big wealth tax is the way you do.
But you would support a different wage for foreigners?
What I think is a massive problem, and this is really a big reason why billionaires can build their wealth so much, it's effectively, when you start a company, if you really want to do it and pay tax, what you'll do is on your profits, you'll withdraw dividends, you'll pay tax on those dividends. What billionaires and just multi-millionaires do, if they have really valuable stock that they own, their stock they're going to borrow against
Take a loan against it.
They'll take a loan against the stock.
No tax on the loan.
No tax on the loan. The stock will appreciate in value.
But they're paying the guy $5 an hour somewhere else.
But I feel like that's...
So you don't think he should have to get minimum wage? Because I think that would be a fair law.
I think that would be reasonable too, but it also seems that on the one hand, you're suggesting we should be fighting for American college students.
Of
and
course.
Now you've posed a question where should we be granting foreign workers who work for an American companies American minimum wage? It seems like somewhat two different questions.
My facetiousness is layered in, would you hire a foreign worker if you had to pay them equal American minimum wage? Because here's the thing, that company is keeping all of that profit. So while you're saying, okay, we got to stop these billionaires, they're taking advantage of stuff, it's like they're exploiting foreign labor and abandoning the Americans. We should do something about it, is my opinion. So, listen, if you had to pay a foreigner $15 an hour instead of $5 an hour, they would also be paying higher payroll taxes. It would be 3 times higher.
But they wouldn't be paying American income tax.
You have to pay still American tax. You're an American corporation, you'd be paying payroll tax.
Well, yeah. The corporation would be paying payroll tax. Yeah, but I mean the employee wouldn't be paying income tax in America.
Listen, I have a corporation in New York and New Jersey. If I were to pay myself as a New Jersey resident from my New York corporation, I would pay New York and Jersey tax. But as if I pay my New Jersey corporation from my New York corporation and then pay myself from my Jersey corporation, I only pay Jersey tax.
But how does that work in the context of a foreign employee?
Well, the foreign employee should have to pay. Should every employee of every American corporation have to pay American taxes?
Well, this is just an ultimate question of taxation. Do you want a residency-based tax system? Well, America has quite an extensive extraterritorial taxation system anyway. America is one of 2 countries in the world, America and Eritrea, I think, where they actually tax their citizens based on citizenship, as opposed to taxing based on residency. So ultimately...
Yeah, because those people come running back anytime there's a problem.
I don't think that's necessarily the reason why America is alone with Eritrea. Yeah, perhaps they've adopted the principle.
I know very wealthy people...
Actually, the funny thing, Eritreans can't leave Eritrea, so I guess...
There's wealthy people and they go and hang out in other countries and then they do all their business here.
Yeah, well...
I really think that we're almost there on an agreement, though. I think we're almost there.
Like, what are we seeking to? It seems like we've discussed about 15 different things.
We've got to get an agreement that
I don't think we're necessarily disagreeing, though.
But
we're just discussing.
How can we keep letting companies, billion-dollar companies... Here's what I think I'm trying to get to. I think there's like an emotional shroud that goes anytime we talk about race, and I'm not trying to talk about race, but once we talk about, okay, they're paying overseas foreigners, there becomes like a touchy subject, but it's like the person who benefits is the billionaire.
Well, how about this for some middle ground?
Sure.
And I'm sure maybe you'll agree with this proposal. We both agree it's an issue that you can borrow against your stock. Your stock appreciates in value higher than, appreciates faster than the rate of interest you're paying. So you just keep reborrowing and you effectively never pay tax as the value of your company grows right up until you die. So how about the middle ground could be, if you do borrow against your stock, we set a minimum threshold, who knows, $50 million. If you're taking a loan and you're putting your stock as collateral, you just tax some of the debt. I know it's not very nice.
No, I'm down for that. Listen, I'm down for that.
A lot of people will intuitively be against
I think that's wrong. I think
if you set a threshold and you apply it to collateral debt with, which is clearly massive value debt, then I think there's a good case to make that it's not that unreasonable to tax people who are clearly have the assets to take out massive loans with their stock as collateral.
Dude, I'm totally with you. I do not think that people should be allowed to take massive loans against assets to use that as their income. Therefore, they don't have to claim a real income and they manipulate the system. I'm not for anything that manipulates the system, but I think that in this current moment in time, there's a lot of emotions around words like tariff and taxing foreign places.
Yeah.
And I just think like, I could think of examples of in my industry, in the finance world, where they have boiler rooms overseas of 100 people in a building that are working like slaves. And we are allowing it. And sometimes when you ask the question, people's proclivity is to go toward, well, I don't want to be prejudiced.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but if you told them that they could pay them $3 an hour, the billionaire would take the extra $2 an hour.
Well, I guess I'll leave you with one thing.
Sure, yeah.
It's been a good discussion.
No, this was long.
Yeah. I don't actually think America's biggest issue right now, and I think this is the same for the UK. I think the biggest issue in America and the UK is wealth inequality. Wealth inequality is at a massively... the disparity between the top 1% and the bottom 1%, especially in the US, is really quite concerning. And if you enable a system which allows you to borrow money, pay no income, and yet all your assets are still somehow appreciating. We've seen in the last 10 years, billionaire growth absolutely skyrocket. And I don't think I think that's largely due to quite generous tax rules.
Listen, our clients, small business owners, have absolutely none of those advantages. You talk about a small business owner, they basically that's the only way that we can really address the wealth inequality. Like the easiest thing that you could do, or the only thing that a lot of us Americans could do is, hey, entrepreneurship. You could start your own business. And right now, TikTok is doing awesome with like TikTok Shop. Like there's people making their own little goods and services and marketing it for free. So it's really cool, but we've got to make sure that we're keeping the playing fields even. And I think, the issue when it comes to like tariffs and taking these loans out and foreign labor is like, all of these things are only able to be utilized by hyper wealthy people. Like we deal with business owners that even if they're doing 200 grand a month, they might only be profiting 10, 15 grand. They've got staff, they've got expenses. So yeah, I think that you're right on the money with the inequality on certain things. I think we're gonna have to come over a couple of humps on tariffs.
I suspect so.
Yeah, but what's your last thoughts on AI? How can an average person right now, you're a smart young business person, you've got a lot of information about socioeconomic things. How could somebody utilize AI right now to grow their business, from your opinion?
You are asking the completely wrong person, but I could give you an absolute answer just straight.
There's a 65-year-old watching this that doesn't even know where to start.
Utilize AI. Well, what I think AI can be especially useful for is actually kind of distilling your own thoughts. That's what I've used it personally for. So you could use something free, DeepSeek. I'm sure that's not going to be a big hit with American viewers, but it is an amazing piece of technology, obviously. And you could start with free AI systems and kind of understand it depends what your goal is. I think a massively useful part of AI is that you can tell AI to ask you questions. You can engage with AI and you can use AI to understand your exact path and your ambitions in life and what you want to do with it. Now, it's kind of hard to say how can you use AI to just improve but you can use it in such a vast
distilling your own stuff was a good way to put it.
For an average person, you're probably not going to just start becoming some expert coder because you've got some free AI. But I do think a really useful thing with AI is kind of clarifying your own thoughts. And I don't think that's necessarily a purpose that people will kind of instinctively associate.
No, that's good. AI. That's a good input.
Often you'll use it to try and just find to answer a question that you might have, but you might not use it to actually understand more about what you're necessarily looking for. And I think it can be massively helpful.
But it's not going away, and business owners need to use it.
It's getting better. Yeah, I think everyone should have a pretty fundamental grasp of the means with which they can kind of use AI to better their personal goals, professional goals, business goals, whatever it may be.
Hell yeah. All right, thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.